In this short video, we will review the new Innovative Assessment Program Classroom Score Reports for grades 6, 7, and 8. These reports are new for the 23-24 school year. In addition, we will also review an important supporting document known as the Score Report Reflection Guide. The Innovative Assessment Program, or the IAP, connects the State Summative Assessment to the ELA Guidebook's curriculum. This connection means that the IAP reports can be used to inform instruction in your upcoming or current ELA Guidebooks units. For the 23-24 school year, the student and classroom score reports have been updated. In addition, there's a new supporting document, the Score Report Reflection Guide for grades 6 to 8. This document is meant to help support decision-making on instructional next steps. First, we'll take a look at the new classroom report, which is quite different than the prior classroom report. In prior years, the classroom report was a simple roster with student performance, whereas in the current year, the classroom score report provides an additional number of looks into student performance. So what's new in the 23-24 classroom score report for grades 6, 7, and 8? First, the classroom score report is now made up of 4 sections, each of which has a specific purpose. Second, instead of raw scores, student performance is characterized in terms of the LEAP 2025 performance ratings. Unlike raw scores, these ratings can be directly compared across unit assessments, meaning that, for example, the ratings from Giver in Window 1 can be compared to the ratings from Christmas Carol in Window 2. And third and finally, the score report within the grouped roster section provides instructional groupings. Coupled with these groupings are questions that are meant to help educators identify potential instructional next steps. As we noted, the score report has 4 sections, each one with a specific purpose. And we have provided these multiple sections to make the report as useful as possible. These different sections provide you with different views of performance, and you may find one that's particularly useful to you. These multiple views are also meant to build on one another by starting with a holistic view of where the class is with the overall results, and then breaking that overall picture down into instructional groupings within the group roster section before zooming back out and providing a more complex view within the classroom profiles. Finally, to provide you insight into how other students are doing, the comparison section shows student performance in your school system, as well as all students taking the IAP. First, we'll start with overall results. Student performance is reported in 3 categories. First, there's knowledge, which is about how well your students understood the text studied in class. This category is based on a section of the assessment in which your students answer questions about the text or texts they read in class to show their understanding of key knowledge and skills in the unit. Second is application, which is about how well your students understood a new text or text related to the ideas studied in class. In this section of the assessment, your students read a new text or texts related to what they learned in class and then responded to questions in a writing prompt to show how well they can apply their knowledge to the key skills taught in the unit. Third and finally is synthesis, which is about how well your students can write about the text studied in class, as well as the text they just read within the assessment. In this section, your students wrote an essay to show their understanding of both what they read in class and the new text provided on the test. Within each reporting category, students are classified as performing either as weak, moderate, or strong, which are 3 performance ratings that correspond to the LEAP 2025 performance ratings. So if we zoom in on a section, we can see the performance of the 22 students in this class. If we zoom in on a section, say knowledge, we can see this performance of the 22 students in the class that have scores. This chart summarizes all 220 students in the class, and we can see that of those students, 8 scored at the weak level, 2 at the moderate level, and 12 at the strong level. Again, these tables, each of them, knowledge, application, and synthesis, summarize the performance of all the students who had scores. So in this case, 22 for knowledge, 22 for application, and 1 student didn't take the essay, so 21 in synthesis for this example classroom. Now that we have looked at the overall results section, we're going to look at the grouped roster section. The grouped roster divides students up within the class into 4 groups, 1 for knowledge, 1 for application, and 1 for synthesis, and a final group for students who did not receive a score. These groups are meant to help teachers plan for future instruction. For example, students in the knowledge group most likely need help understanding the text read in class, as well as the questions asked about those texts. If we zoom in on the score report, we can see that of the 22 students in this class with scores, 10 were in the knowledge group, 8 were in the application group, 4 were in the synthesis group, and 2 were in the no score group. These groupings are created by essentially dicing up or dividing up the classroom roster, which we'll explain next. On this screen, you'll see all 24 students from the classroom, including the 2 who didn't take the test at all. What you'll see is that we sorted students based on their performance, starting with those who are weakest in knowledge, running to those who are strongest in knowledge, and then similarly for application and synthesis. The way the groupings on the prior slide worked is, for the students who had moderate or weak in knowledge, those 10 students are placed into the knowledge group. Similarly, for those students who were strong in knowledge but weak in application and moderate, those 8 students were placed in the application group, and finally the remaining students were placed in the synthesis group. Those who didn't have scores were placed in the no score group. These groupings are then reflected within the pages of the score report after the overall table. So there's a page or multiple pages for the knowledge group, and similarly for application, synthesis, and the no score group. Each of the individual tables for each of the groups, knowledge, application, and synthesis, is accompanied by a set of reflection questions that are meant to help guide considerations of what kinds of instructional next steps or levers are likely to be most helpful for students. For example, if we zoom in here, we can see the 3 reflection questions for the knowledge group. And these questions are also in the score report reflections guide. This brings us back to the support resource, the IAP Grade 6 to 8 Score Report Reflections Guide. This document is meant to be paired with the classroom report, and specifically the grouped roster section, as well as assessments from curriculum. Drawing on information from both the report and classroom assessments should help provide additional insight into potential instructional next steps. This flowchart illustrates the process of using the Score Report Reflections Guide for the knowledge group. For each group within the grouped roster, the reflection guide provides a number of corresponding questions. Looking at the students in the score report, the reflection guide asks you to draw on a recent classroom writing task and think through a set of reflection questions. Doing so lets you potentially better match students to instructional next steps or levers provided in the second half of the reflections guide. We'll now move on to the third part of the report, which is the classroom profiles. The grouped roster section, which we just reviewed, puts students into 3 groups based on where they are most likely to need help. The profile section, shown here, instead shows the number of students for each unique combination of ratings for the 3 categories. This takes that roster table and collapses it into the unique patterns of ratings on knowledge, application, and synthesis. So let's zoom in on one of these rows and see how that's created. The top of this slide shows roster data from 3 students who scored weak in all 3 reporting categories. What the profiles do is collapse this information into a single count, showing the number of unique students for each unique pattern. For example, we can see that the 3 students who scored weak here are transformed into that profile of weak, weak, weak with a count of 3. Finally, we'll take a look at the comparison section. The final section, comparisons, compares the class to the school system, and all of the students taking the IAP. Each row in this report provides the percentage of students in each performance level, strong, moderate, and weak, for a group of students for a given reporting category. If we zoom in just on knowledge, we can look and see that at the class level, 36% of the students had a weak rating for knowledge, 9% had a moderate rating, and finally that 55% of the students had a strong rating. And we can also note that this class appears to have a higher level of students in the strong category for knowledge when compared to the school system and students taking the IAP. In this way, the comparisons are meant to help contextualize how well your class is doing relative to others. Thank you for taking the time to learn about the new classroom score report. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please contact Ruth Caluette, the Innovative Assessment Program Coordinator.